Hello, everyone, and welcome to Level the Field Leadership. I'm very, very excited that you have decided to join me today while I interview our guest. If you are an introvert like I am, this is definitely going to be the episode for you. If you are not an introvert, hopefully it gives you a little bit of an insight into how to be a good leader when you are leading an introvert. But we'll get to all of that in just a minute. If this is your first time, I would just want to say welcome. Not going to ask you to do anything at all. Just want for you to simply enjoy the conversation that I'm going to have with Greg. But if this is not your first time and you keep coming back, it's a whole lot easier if you just like and subscribe. So that way you'll get those alerts whenever a new episode is published. I do believe that we all encounter various challenges in the workplace, and anything we can do to have the right tool for the right time, the right place to combat some of those issues in the work environment, I think is very important. And so that's what I hope you get out of each of the episodes that you're listening to. I do believe that workplace burnout is very real, and anything we can do to reduce burnout and fatigue in our leadership roles will have a positive impact on our team, on us, on our families. It dominoes from there. So without further ado, let me introduce our guest. Greg Weinger has spent over 20 years proving that introverts and unconventional thinkers can thrive in leadership. A seasoned product and technology executive, he has helped scale startups 10 times to $70 million, over $70 million. That's a lot in revenue, leading teams that build market leading digital products and drive business growth. A Stanford graduate, he studied English literature, which I think I have some questions about if we ever get to the English lit component.
Sure.
Creative writing and software engineering. So quite an eclectic background there. But it does give Greg a very unique ability to blend technical expertise, storytelling, and strategic thinking to make complex ideas accessible and actionable. And for those of you that are returning, you know I like to base each of our episodes around scripture because I believe that our faith is tied into our abilities as well. And for that, it's Proverbs 27:28. Even fools are thought wise if they keep silent, and discerning if they hold their tongues, which I thought was fitting for our introvert discussion today, Greg. So, Greg, thank you so much for joining me. I'm so thankful that you're here today.
Yeah, thanks so much for having me. I agree that that quote is really spot on. It speaks to, I mean, it's such great ancient wisdom, and it also makes me think about how different cultures. I mean, introversion is something that we're born with, but the attitudes toward it are culturally based, and so there are, obviously people have recognized this, and there are cultures in the world today who value introverts. That holding your tongue, which I'm not doing right now, is considered wisdom.
Right. So before we go too far down the path, let's define what an introvert is, because I know my definition of it, there's a lot of social media definitions of introvert. So for the purposes of our discussion, what is our definition of introvert?
Sure. I want to look at two lenses because there is a lot of talk about it right now. My definition is really about what is your primary tendency? Are you going inward or are you going outward? Are you going inward to think, tune into your feelings and, what thoughts are coming up, emotions? Or are you primarily acting, speaking, emoting, interacting with the world? In order just to figure those things out. So the introvert is the person who's going inward first, the extrovert is going outward first. And and there is a common definition people talk about, it's like, where do you get your energy from? And I think that's super useful shorthand to understand. Just think of a party. You go to a party, the introvert might be having a great time for hour, couple hours. Certain point, they're going to hit a wall and crash, and the general situation is draining their energy. Whereas an extrovert, a couple hours, they're just getting going. They're getting more and more energy. And then, the idea is the introvert has to go back and, recharge alone. And so I think that's helpful. There are some challenges with that because, an introvert will, if you're in a one-on-one conversation or a small group of friends that you enjoy, like you might go 2 hours, three, four, you might go all night. That can be a very energizing situation for you. And I talk to all kinds of extroverts who are like, well, I just had that, that big night. Boy, I just had to be alone the next day. So that it kind of breaks down. And I think actually the thinking actually explains that situation too, because the introvert brains are naturally more in an aroused state, or just in terms of activated state, as a baseline. And so you throw yourself into a party situation, and that, like, you get overstimulated, and at a certain point you just kind of, you're processing the conversation around you, and there's noises in the background or people dancing, all the music, and all this, it's more and more stimulation. And because your brain is kind of wired to process it deeply, you kind of run out of energy. So that I believe that explains the other definition as well.
Can I just say that I feel seen? Everything that you just described, the whole hitting the wall, and you max out on your ability to have any of those dialogues anymore. That is me to a T. So shout out to all of my introverts that are listening. You are not alone. There are many of us that are out there. We're by ourselves more than we're in a group. So what qualities do you think make introverts effective leaders? Because I think oftentimes if somebody is, in the center of attention and they're the ones always leading the meetings, and, they're always the ones that are talking, that they're seen more as a leader, more so than your more quiet leaders in the background. So what qualities do us introverts have that make us effective?
Absolutely. And then there's a bias against people who are more extroverted in showing those tendencies. But introverts carry a lot of these leadership strengths, starting out with the thinking, taking in all the information, thinking long term, seeing the big picture, strategic planning. So that's like just starting from there. Introverts tend to be very collaborative. They're seeing all the different viewpoints, and that's kind of tied into that, that need to see all the different angles. This makes us more naturally collaborative and working with everybody, all the different constituencies in the room. Introverts can bring a degree of calmness to a situation. If you're more inward, there's less agitation, and so you can actually. I've had this a lot, and I've seen this from other introverts. They say, "Oh, you're always so calm, and you make me feel more calm." They can bring a steadiness to a situation. And then last, introverts, they can be, not all, but introverts can be very empathetic. And so that's something that's a really important leadership skill.
So if they have all of these really great leadership skills, why is it that there are some organizations that tend to overlook these introverted individuals when it comes to leadership roles?
Well, there's going to be more. In order to be an effective leader, you are going to have to cultivate some other skills to complement those. And maybe they don't come natural to you, but they can absolutely be learned. And so this has been my experience. When I started out, I was not necessarily presenting as a leader. Like you said, I possessed these skills, these strengths that I was just describing, but I had to learn when to show up and come across as more decisive, knowing when to, it was time to stop thinking about things and talking about things and make decisions, when to take action. I needed to work on my public speaking, and I had certain fears of public speaking or speaking up in groups. And it was by working on those skills and taking action and developing them that those rounded out my leadership skills. And then I was able to really be effective as a leader.
Okay. How did you how did you work on them? Like what kind of was your process? So you talked about the public speaking component of it. Like what was your process to get you to a point where you became more comfortable doing those sort of public speaking initiatives?
Sure. Yeah. And for me, it was, and also the advice I hear from people I respect, it's very gradual. It really pays to be gentle with yourself, and maybe it's just a small meeting where you start to speak out, and so you don't want to jump right to the stage full of 500 people. That's, you want to create opportunities that feel uncomfortable enough, but not too uncomfortable where you're just so far out of your comfort zone that it actually becomes a negative experience and makes you more fearful for the next time. So just in general, for all of these skills, it's progressive exposure, and it's finding support, finding people who believe in you, who will support you to go to those things, and you just try a little bit at a time. Anything that you practice, you're going to get more comfortable with, and you're eventually going to get competent with.
Hmm. Hmm. So if you want to run the marathon, start with just running a half mile. And then
Mm-hmm.
when that's not challenging anymore, then do another half mile on top of that. And little by little, before you know it, you're in the marathon.
Yeah, and the career progression. So I was in companies, but I followed a pretty standard progression, and it your roles give you the opportunities. At first you need to learn how to speak up in your team meeting, and then you need to speak up in the meeting where the boss is in there, and then at a certain level you get chances to present where there's senior leadership, and then there's speaking opportunities come up. And if you're looking for those opportunities, they will emerge. And it's important to find allies in all of this journey. You let people know, I'm here, but I want to get here. And that's a really important thing, because the people who are extroverts, they're not going to be looking for you. They're looking for people who look like them.
Right.
But there may be an introverted leader, or there might be just a sympathetic leader, and if you let them know what you're interested in, then they'll find ways to support you, and they'll help find opportunities for you to practice and learn and maybe fail sometimes.
I love that. I love that. So, you mentioned your natural career progression. I think sometimes introverts have a hard time building trust with people that are on their team because they are kind of reserved, they're kind of closed off. They're likely not going to be the ones that are going to speak out or anything like that. So, how can somebody who identifies as an introvert and knows for a fact that they're not going to be the one to strike up a conversation just at random, how can these individuals begin to build trust with the people that they work with to try to go along that journey of natural career progression?
Sure. And this is kind of one of the introvert superpowers is one-on-one conversation. So introverts excel, and we love going deep, and we love to have that one-on-one conversation. So you can leverage that to propel your career. That's kind of the linchpin, and it's a more personal touch. I learned this kind of early to mid in my career, is that when I had to work with people across the company, and or even probably just starting with my own team, have those one-on-one conversations, because those tend to be areas where you're more comfortable. Set up a time, talk to somebody, and build a personal connection. And then once you have that, you bring those personal connections into group settings where it's maybe less comfortable. They know you. They might be more willing to say, "Oh, let's see what Rachel has to say here." You can turn them into allies and saying, "Hey, look, I'm having trouble breaking in here, or can you help support me bring up this topic of conversation?" So once you cultivate these relationships with people, and you cultivate them around the company, suddenly you've built this kind of a network which is inherently there to support you. And that's actually an influence network. And I worked I mean, in my career, I've worked mostly in product management the last 15, 20 years. And so I needed to make things happen. I needed people to take action. I needed to motivate projects to completion across the company, across different departments. People have their own agendas, they're busy, but it's the relationships that I formed which helped make all of these actions actually happen when I needed them to.
I love how you phrase that. It's you're creating allies across the organization and you're doing it one by one. You're not going back to that whole analogy about running a half mile before the whole marathon. Little each person that you have that connection with, you're building your half mile. And then before you know it, maybe you have those allies in a third of the organization. Obviously, depending upon the size, that can change. But
Mhm.
a third is better than none at all, you know. Um,
Yeah.
but what about, so there are some situations where maybe somebody is hired into the organization. So they're hired to be the director of a certain team. And that introverted leader gets in there and realizes, wow, this is a high energy, highly extroverted team.
Mm.
What strategies can you offer up to help these individuals who maybe are going into a brand new environment? They don't have any of those organizational allies, and they really want to be effective leaders for their team, but the vibe, as the kids would say, is very different from their own. What strategies or advice can you give to those individuals?
Yeah, and at a certain point, the you need to go beyond the one-on-one situation and start to be able to share in group situations. And so that's a skill that develops and is cultivated over time. You gain comfort in those situations. So it's gaining comfort in leading meetings. And this is another kind of superpower hack for introverts is that leading a meeting is actually a really great role for an introvert because you're not, a lot of the challenges in group meetings is knowing when to break in or how to break in. When you are the meeting leader, you are charged with that role. Everyone expects you to kind of structure the meeting and guide the conversation. And so you have an official role, and that actually makes things easier for you. So it's actually something I've loved and I've encouraged people to do. And and when you're a new director or whatever, you're coming in the team, that's your natural role. So you have this opportunity to guide the conversation. There's lots of opportunities to plan everything out. And so that's another important skill for, well, it's just something that helps support introverts is planning ahead in situations, coming with an agenda, topics, things. And so you're not forced to think on the spot because that can be more difficult if your brain is overstimulated. So as the leader, you're coming in prepared, you can have stories, you can start to share personal things about yourself, humorous stories, things where maybe slightly embarrassing. This kind of breaks down the barriers, you show vulnerability, and that allows you to connect with maybe this higher energy team just as a starting point.
Mhm, mhm. Well, and because for the most part, introverts are known to be really great listeners, you are just sitting there absorbing all of the information. You're really trying to take it all in. You don't have to necessarily have an answer. And I personally think one of the greatest phrases that a leader can use is, can you give me some time to think about that? Because then at least that other person knows that you really and truly are considering what they're saying. You're not just offering up a suggestion for the heck of it. And especially if you're new in the role, you do need time to kind of piece things together and figure out what's what before you just start making decisions on the fly that really don't make sense.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, active listening. Yeah, restating, reframing. In a way, so this group leader situation, you're applying the skills that you have in one-on-one situations, listening. It's the act of listening. Do I have that right? Rephrasing, and then posing a new question. So it the one-on-one kind of becomes the catalyst or the guide for having, extending that to a meeting situation. And then at the senior leadership level, it's just holding it at the very large group, the all hands meeting kind of situation, because each skill builds on each other, but it's also based on, yeah, it's grounded in it. You still have to be listening and reflecting back to people, the mood and the questions people have.
Do you think this is true for handling conflict as well? Do you think these strategies would apply if you have to confront somebody about a difficult topic or a difficult issue that's going on?
Yeah, those skills definitely help. It's active listening and empathy. You need to be very present in a conflict situation and attuned to the other person. And so conflict was one that was personally very difficult for me. It's something I had to work on for a while. And part of it was just my own personal emotions. I would personalize conflict. And since I got over the hump with that, I just really love it because it is the fastest path to resolving issues and really getting everybody on the same page and moving in the same direction. So I, I really started out my career kind of shying away from it, and now make almost go directly for that because I just know it's the fastest path to a better place for everyone.
Mhm. Yeah, I think a lot of people really have issues with confrontation, and I think that's because there's such this negative stereotype when it comes to confrontation. It
Mm-hmm.
doesn't have to be aggressive, it doesn't have to be loud. And in my mind, if I'm wanting to sit down and have an intense conversation with somebody else, it's because I actually care about the person. I care about us getting past this particular issue. If I didn't care, I wouldn't be sitting here making myself uncomfortable, right? And I think too often we choose the easier path, and then we wonder why we continue to have this issue over and over and over again. I do think that there's a time and a place when you talk to somebody. I do think tone matters. I think, all of those things have to be considered. But if you really and truly care about an issue and you really and truly want to resolve a situation with that person, you'll let yourself be uncomfortable. I'd rather have a 30-minute uncomfortable conversation than the next 3 years of uncomfortable every time I'm around that person. Because it's, life's too short. We need to have those conversations, but it can be hard. You're absolutely right.
Yeah, I really liked what you're saying. I mean, there's a kindness and caring. If it comes from this point of you and you of caring, then that comes across, and that carries through and kind of helps in that situation. Another point why introverts can be very good at this is that it's another one-on-one conversation. You're deeply relating, you're seeking to understand, and we can bring this calmness. It doesn't have to be like some loud violent interaction. It goes much better if it's not, but that's just a natural tendency for introverts, so you can support a very healthy confrontation.
Yeah. Yeah. No, I totally agree with that. Was there anybody in your life that was a really positive, introverted leader that had a significant impact on you that helped you on your journey?
I had an example of a leader who it was mostly by his example. He was the number two in the company, and the the CEO was kind of a big personality. He was a sales leader, and this other guy, he did business development. He was very quiet. He was just much more quiet. Is not a flamboyant personality, but what he did was very interesting. He would sit in meetings, and everyone would talk. Everybody else would talk in the meeting, and he would just be sitting there, and you could tell he was listening very, very deeply, very intently. And it was almost this tension would build. Everyone was starting to wonder, well, what is he going to say? And then, sure enough, at the end, he would share his opinion. And a lot of times people are just, wow, kind of blown away by it. But so he really kind of created this really a sense of power just by staying more silent. And then he was obviously super smart, and he had strong opinions. Sometimes you didn't want to hear what he had to say because it was sharp. Um, but I just thought that was an interesting way for a quieter person to really hold a lot of power.
Yeah, when every word matters, people are more willing to listen to what it is that you have to say. If I one thing I just really hate is whenever people are trying to hit like a word count for the day, and it's like, why are you talking? Why are you continuing to have a conversation? If your words are really concise and you really thought about it, you should say what you have to say and then just be done at that point. So. Well, what closing thoughts or closing ideas do you have for those of us who self-identify as being introverts and leaders for that matter too?
Well, my view is that there's never been a better time to be an introvert and to be an introverted leader. There's so much information and such a growing awareness of this right now. I'm super excited. I'm personally trying to be part of amplifying awareness of this trait because depending on the studies, it's 30 to 50% of the population of people who are actually introverted. And so there's a lot of people. This means look around you in your classrooms, in your meetings, in your social gatherings. There are people all around you who could be more comfortable. They could be made to feel more welcome. And so my message for introverts is do this for them, do this to help other people like you, and you can all be more comfortable, but also just make more contributions. There's just a lot of great ideas and great contributions that introverts have that aren't being fully heard because we still have this bias, particularly in our businesses, for towards extroversion, and we're not systematically making sure that people are being heard. So it's like there's still a lot of challenges, but I'm really excited about the growth here.
Well, I'm very excited for that as well, and I can say that I have seen that shift over time, and so I'm thankful that we're headed in the right direction. So now's the opportunity that I turn it over. I call it the shameless plug. So 2, 3 minutes, the floor is yours. Whatever you want to talk about, whatever you would like to promote, as long as it's legal and it's ethical. But I turn the floor over to you for whatever you want to discuss.
I certainly it's certainly legal. And I believe it's ethical too. I have a podcast myself, the Powerful Introvert podcast, and I interview authors, leaders, coaches, academics, people doing research on the subject, people who are like you and me, and we're it's just been fantastic. I've got about 23 episodes that are published on Apple, Spotify. I'm on YouTube. Just search Powerful Introvert. You'll find me. And I just have been so privileged over the past year to be able to talk to amazing people doing really impressive things. Like I find it inspiring every day, every week. I am interviewing 2 or 3 people a week and having great conversations. And I'm just so personally inspired by what I see introverts doing, the kinds of impacts they're having on the world. And I'm really out to change the culture. So please join us.
We ride at dawn individually. That's awesome. And I'm
Absolutely.
I'm gonna make sure I put all of that information in the show notes. So wherever you happen to be listening to the sound of our voices, just click on the show notes. You should see that information there. Greg, this was so encouraging. I know I personally feel inspired, and I feel, like I said at the beginning of this, I feel very seen in my leadership journey as well. So thank you so much for all of the information that you've given to us today.
Absolutely. And I think what you're doing for your students and is just wonderful too, just to provide resources like this. So I'm really happy to be here.
Awesome. Well, for those of you that are listening, if you did like what you heard, what was coming through your earwaves, then definitely hit the subscribe button. That way you'll be notified whenever new content is posted. Share this episode with other introverted leaders or extroverted leaders, quite frankly. That way we can all be a little bit more mindful of our different ways that we approach leadership. There's no wrong or right way necessarily. We all have our own different flavors. So you never know when this might resonate with somebody. And you can follow me on Instagram. I do try to post some positive content. There's plenty of content out there that is totally negative and just not worth our time. So while you're doing your scrolling, you can see something that will help you on your leadership journey along the way. And just remember, you are made to be a leader exactly where you're at, wherever you're leading, whatever it is that you're currently doing. And I truly hope the things that we talked about today can help you develop the roots of your leadership so you can weather any storm. Greg, thank you so much for your time today. And for everybody listening, take care of yourself, take care of your team. You can 1000% do this. And until next time.